2024. Can you believe that already? Last meeting of 2024. If you haven't put ice upon your credit cards or your checkbooks from Black Friday, please do so. Some of us, we have visitors from out of town from Uganda, and so they shop like you can't imagine. So anyway, appreciate y'all coming. We do have a quorum, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Is there any adjustments to the agenda that anyone has? Paul, do you have any adjustments?
I don't, Commissioner. Other than on number 6, OMPOC members, I will actually start the presentation and Kelly will assist me.
Oh, you'll start that presentation. All right, thank you for noting that. And then is there any adjustments to the agenda from any of the members? All right, seeing none, let's move right quickly into any comments. Is there any online comment folks that are ready to give some comment, Paul?
Let me double check. Counselor, Commissioner, I don't see anybody from the general public.
All right, sounds good. Does anyone from the board want to make any comments about anything? This is your chance. Of course, I'll give you other chances, but this is just the one that makes you feel guilty. So go ahead. Anyone? All right. Sounds good. Well, then let's move forward to our minutes. Hope everybody's had a chance to look over the minutes from the last meeting. And if everything looks okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve those minutes to move forward.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, counselors both. I have a motion to approve the minutes by Counselor Moe. And I have a second by Counselor Groves. All those in favor indicate by aye. Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing any. Let's move forward. Good job. We're moving quick, Vidal. Come on. So
Thank you.
we get ourselves to number 6, appointment of our OMPOC members. The reason that we're having this particular item is, as you all know, 31st of January is the OMPOC meeting, and typically we choose new members after that, or we can do that before. So there's a little bit of background, obviously, Paul's going to put on this. So Paul, if you've got some background, let's hear what you got.
Thank you, Chair. The main reason I wanted to lead is because you and I had a conversation this morning about this agenda item. And as you noted, normally we would appoint the OMPOC members in February. At the same time, we elect the 2025 NPC officers after your jurisdictions have decided who's going to be on NPC. However, we decided originally to put the OMPOC member appointment on this month's agenda because there is a OMPOC meeting in January, and technically the current OMPOC members' terms expire at the end of this month. I believe what the chair and I agreed to this morning is a slightly different approach, where I'm recommending that today that you consent to your existing OMPOC members, Councilor Moe and Susan Cox, continuing in their roles through January and through the January OMPOC meeting. And then in February, we will appoint new, maybe the same, members.
Yeah, I think I'm currently still the chair through the next meeting, and so that'd be handy. But anyway, I'm glad to be. I'm learning a lot on that committee. I'll let you tell you a lot, you guys.
Well, if anyone else has any more discussion about that item, let's hear it. Obviously,
LTD's having their committee assignments. We're looking at them and making those assignments, but it isn't until January. So we'd like to make a commitment that someone from LTD will be available, but that name, the person may change. Maybe me, but it may be someone else. Is that okay?
So would that be something, Paul, that the committee by absentee quorum or vote or head nod approve of that? How does that work?
To be honest, since we're not really appointing new members or taking that much of a formal action, I think just head nods that the current members can continue through the January OMPOC meeting would be sufficient.
Okay, sounds good. Do I have head nods for that? And then obviously the head nod would include if LTD picks someone other than Susan to be the representative. Everybody okay with that? Signify by a thumbs up. Okay. Seems like we have that.
What's an absentee quorum?
What's an absentee quorum? I don't know. It sounded fancy. I thought, you know.
Thank you.
Somebody who wasn't here could vote. You know how that goes, right?
Okay.
It's a mail-in ballot, Councilor Moe. All right. Any more discussion to that item, Paul?
No, Kelly, is there anything else you need?
Are you talking to me, Kelly?
Yes, Miss Kelly Clark.
Nope. I don't need anything else. This is great. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes,
I have an attendee who I'm not sure who it is, who has raised their hand. If it's okay with you, I'm going to allow that person to speak so we can find out who that is.
yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So whoever the guest is.
Is that me? Is that Pat Farr?
Commissioner Farr, that is you.
For some reason, this is what my link gave me is this. I can see you. I guess you cannot see me or know who I am.
Well,
but I've got my, as Sting said, I'll be watching you.
He also said call the police too, but that was a different band.
Commissioner Farr, I'm going to promote you to a panelist, and that will allow me to make sure you're.
Last time I got promoted, it was the President of the United States that did it. And that's great.
Well, hey, if you have more technical issues, you can just come over to my office. We got the same channel turned on here, so that works. Okay.
Paul, I have the same oh, there we go. I'm up. Thank you.
Good day, Mayor Venice. How are you coming down from the last little bits of meetings of your esteemed career? How are you feeling?
Hang on. I'm just trying to get my video on somewhere. Join as panelist.
All right, Leanne.
There you go.
Now I'm with you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I think this is my last MPC meeting. So
it is. It is. Well, we thank you for attending, and we thank you for all the service that you've done in your illustrious career, and we obviously wish you the best as you go forward. Hopefully there's some kayaking and mountain climbing in there or something fun, right?
Yeah, a lot of elective opportunities that I haven't had in the last few years. So
spoken from an elected official, how quaint. Awesome. All right, let's move along to item 7A then. As we move along, this is our Metropolitan Planning Organization update. This is our living document of our transportation plan, and it's a monthly update from staff. And this month, according to the data in the packet, this is kind of focused on the who of what we are as an MPO, the population and the demographic and the equity part. And I believe, Kelly, you've got this presentation on your docket.
I do. Thank you. I actually wanted to introduce my RTP Regional Transportation Plan team members, Rachel Dorfman and Josh Kaczynski, both with LCOG, and we've been working diligently on this project as a team. So wanted a chance to introduce us all to you. Rachel will actually be presenting on the existing conditions memo that's in your packet today, with the focus, like you mentioned, Chair, on kind of the who of the MPO, but there's a lot else that will be covered and kind of at a high level, given it's a very long document, and we recognize that. And I'll hand that over to Rachel now.
All right, welcome, Rachel and Josh. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am going to share my screen. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And now I'm going to ask, can everybody see my screen? Oh, no, hold on. I did not click the share button. Now can everybody see my screen?
Good, yes.
Okay, great. So as you know, thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm Rachel Dorfman, planner with the Central Lane MPO. So we've been providing regular updates to MPC on the process for updating the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. So as Kelly and Commissioner Lovell mentioned, I'm going to talk to you today about the existing conditions memo, which provides a snapshot of the baseline conditions in the Central Lane region. Let's see. So documenting the regional context is a critical part of developing an RTP that reflects the region's unique population and natural and built environment, and is also responsive to the region's needs. So we use this information in a variety of ways. Some of it's used as data inputs for the land use and travel models. Some informs analysis that we conduct later in the process, like the needs analysis and environmental analysis we'll do toward the end of the update. Some helps us target our outreach, and in general, documenting the existing conditions is an important part of our federal obligations around performance-based planning and programming, because understanding how things are today helps to inform the goals, objectives, and performance measures in the plan, and it also helps us track and understand our progress toward our goals. So before we get into content, we want to quickly just kind of note two things about the overall approach to this memo. They're discussed in the memo itself, but First, the MPO staff are presenting this memo as a living document. So we have been updating continually as sections become relevant and data are available. We've been presenting the memo contents to the project's technical advisory committee as they're finalized, and we're working really closely with jurisdictional staff to ensure the accuracy of the local data. And we decided to bring a complete draft to MPC rather than bringing it piecemeal as we did with the technical advisory committee. And then second, where relevant, we're providing links directly to publicly available data sources and online maps. So we think there are a few benefits to this approach. First of all, it should allow us for a more kind of interactive loop for review and feedback. And it also maximizes efficiency, so we're not having to repeatedly remake static maps as data are updated. And then it also helps ensure we're presenting best available data from authoritative sources. So you may have noticed in the memo itself, there are many places where you'll see links to sources rather than static maps. So the memo has 7 sections, which are displayed here on the screen. I'll just kind of briefly touch on each of those. The overview section introduces the content and describes the approach that I just mentioned. The location section provides an overview of the MPO's orientation within Lane County and Oregon. Demographics, land use, and employment provides a snapshot of who lives, works, and travels in the Central Lane area. Equity discusses the impacts of transportation investments on historically excluded populations. Safety presents fatal and serious injury crashes. Transportation network data catalogs existing conditions of the transportation network for all modes. And then finally, we have a section covering environment and natural hazards, which explores the Central Lane region's environmental context. So as Kelly mentioned, and you may have noticed, this memo is extremely long. It's almost 100 pages. We have over 50 maps, tables, and figures in there, and it's too much for one presentation. So we decided to narrow the focus of the discussion today to the demographics and equity and safety. So, but of course, the full document is part of your packet, and we welcome your feedback on any and all parts of the report. Happy to take feedback today following the presentation, or you're also welcome to reach out to MPO staff with any edits or comments following the meeting as well. So getting into the details, the Central Lane region is growing. The region grew by 8.9% over the past decade. 85% of the MPO population live in the cities of Eugene or Springfield. And the heat map on the right shows areas with the highest density of households within the MPO. So the highest density areas are marked in the dark red, and they include the urban cores of Eugene and Springfield and the area surrounding the University of Oregon campus. Regional demographics play a big role in people's transportation needs and behaviors. Understanding who lives, works, and travels in the MPO area and how these factors are changing over time will help us to better align the regional goals, priorities, and investments to ensure that the RTP is meeting the needs of the people it's meant to serve. So the next 2 slides give a really kind of broad overview of what you'll find in much more detail in the memo. Overall, the region has gotten older, more diverse, and wealthier over the past decade. The share of the population 65 and older has increased, while the population under 18 has decreased. The number of people who are one or more race other than white has increased, and the share of the population living with one or more disabilities has increased. Educational attainment has increased. Median household income has increased, and poverty has decreased. The highest concentration of households in poverty are located in Eugene's urban core, downtown Springfield, and near the University of Oregon. And though poverty has decreased overall, the number of people experiencing homelessness across Lane County has increased. So where people work is also an important factor in their travel patterns and behavior. The regional unemployment rate has decreased in the last decade. The top 3 industries in the Central Lane area are professional and business services, health and social services, and retail and consumer services. The heat map on the right there shows employment density within the MPO. The densest areas in dark pink, which include Eugene's urban core and the gateway area of Springfield. So this graphic gives a very high-level picture of how people in the MPO area in Oregon are traveling to work and how this is shifting over time. The graphic shows that the share of the population that drives alone to work decreased between 2012 and 2022. And this shift appears to be kind of larger across Oregon than in our region. The share of the population that works from home also increased in that time. And then for simplicity's sake, this graphic lumps together all other modes. This is because shifts in these individual modes are really hard to see at this scale, but collectively you can kind of see the wider pattern, which is an overall decrease. And I just want to note that a much more detailed version of this graphic that shows shifts in those other modes as well as other geographies can be found in the memo. So the transportation system has an enormous impact on public health, mobility, access to opportunity, and the quality of neighborhoods. It also has created and exacerbated racial and socioeconomic disparities in public health and safety. So it's the MPO's responsibility to evaluate and minimize the impact of proposed transportation investments on population groups that may be traditionally underserved or underrepresented. And we use the term historically excluded populations to recognize the fact that the benefits and burdens of transportation investments have not always been fairly distributed, with the majority of burdens being placed on low-income communities, communities of color, elderly populations, and people with disabilities. So the map on the right shows in blue the locations in the Central Lane MPO area where the percentage of one or more of these populations is higher than the region-wide average. So essentially the areas in the darkest blue are areas where there are higher concentrations of historically excluded populations. And we use this map to help us analyze potential impacts to these populations and also to help us target outreach. So the Central Lane MPO does not directly affect housing policy or land use decisions, but we do think it's important for us to understand how housing and transportation affordability intersect with equity and also people's access to amenities, goods, and services. So the map on screen here is looking at the spatial relationship between the historically excluded populations, which I described on the last slide, and the housing and transportation cost burden as defined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the U.S. Department of Transportation. So I know this map is a lot to take in on screen. It's found on page 32 of the memo. And I'll also note that we created an interactive online version of the map that also includes amenities. So there's even more to take in. And there's a link to that in the memo as well. But I just want to quickly describe what is on screen here. So the base map shows the areas with higher concentrations of historically excluded populations in blue. This is the same map I showed on the previous slide. The hatch marks in orange show where populations are transportation cost burdened only. And then the crosshatch shows where populations are both transportation cost burdened and housing cost burdened. So one thing you'll notice is that most of the MPO area is designated as at least transportation cost burdened, if not both transportation and housing cost burdened. And there are not a lot of areas that don't fall under that designation. So one conclusion we've drawn from this analysis is that areas where higher concentrations of historically excluded populations and transportation cost burden overlap, we think those areas might be good places to target transportation options programming. So the map on the right here shows the same base map with historically excluded populations in blue, this time overlaid with fatal and serious injury crashes. Again, I recognize this is kind of difficult to read in a presentation, so I'll highlight just a couple of things. First of all, there are 4 corridors that experienced 4 or more fatalities between 2018 and 2022, which is the time period the map covers. 37% of fatal and serious injury crashes occurred within or bordering areas with high concentrations of historically excluded populations. And we think this is meaningful because these are the same areas that contain just 20% of the total regional population. So that says to us that a disproportionate share of serious crashes is occurring in these areas. So as I mentioned, we decided to spend a little more time on the region's demographics during this presentation, but before I wrap up, I just want to highlight what you'll find in the remaining 2 sections of the memo. So the transportation network data section documents the existing network, including roads, bridges, bike and pedestrian facilities, transit, the airport, rail, freight, intermodal facilities, key destinations, and regional visitors and tourism. I want to note that the Technical Advisory Committee has reviewed and provided feedback on the local data contained in this section, and we have adjusted as appropriate to address the feedback and ensure its accuracy. And please don't feel like you need to see the fine print on the maps on screen right now. They're really just there to be a teaser to illustrate that there's a lot of great information and great maps in the memo itself. Same goes for this slide. The maps are small. They're really there by way of example to show you the kind of thing you're going to find in the memo. But just a real quick overview of the environment and natural hazards section. It documents the environmental conditions of the area, including tribal resources, cultural resources, air quality, heat exposure, water resources, wildlife habitat, and natural hazards. This baseline data will be used at a later phase in the RTP I mentioned earlier to inform the environmental analysis, which flags at a really high planning level the possible impacts of the plan's projects on environmental resources, and then identifies mitigation actions. And I do want to note that this section is currently under review by local, state, and federal resource agencies as part of our federally required environmental consultation process. We decided to engage environmental resource agencies earlier in the update process this time around, which was in response to a recommendation that came out of the INVEST evaluation we did. You may remember we came to talk to you about it. MPO staff used the INVEST tool to evaluate the sustainability of the adopted current RTP to help inform this update process. So that consultation is going on right now, and we'll incorporate the feedback from these agencies into the final draft of this memo. So finally, here's a quick list of just some of the things we're working on. The project website and online open house are nearly complete. As I just mentioned, we're undergoing the environmental consultation, we're updating the travel model, we're working with the jurisdictions to update the project lists. We're also working with jurisdictional land use planners to review and provide direction on the population and employment estimates and forecasts. And we're developing a memo that introduces the performance measures and explores the new federal requirement to include a system performance report in the RTP. So there's lots of good stuff to come. So thank you for your time this morning. We're happy to receive any feedback on the memo or on what you heard in the presentation today. I have Kelly Clark and Josh Kaczynski here with me to help answer any questions that come up. And I just want to reiterate quickly that we erred on the side of keeping this presentation high level at the direction of our technical advisory committee, but we're aware it's a lot to take in. So we can bring back any part of this memo to MPC to discuss in further detail if that's of interest. So I'll stop there.
Well done, Rachel. Thank you very much. Questions from Councilor Groves?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. One map kind of caught my attention in there, and that was the one with the fatal or serious injury accidents, and talking about them being aligned with areas of underrepresented populations. They also seem to be on major arterials, which I would expect they have a higher frequency of travel. Do you have any correlation that would attach that to the marginalized communities? For example, do we have any data on where the trip originated and the destination it was going to, or are these people passing through the community?
I don't believe we have that level of detail on the data, but I would defer to Josh if there's anything else that we can infer about where these crashes are occurring or who's traveling.
Thanks, Rachel. Josh Kaczynski, Associate Transportation Planner with Lane Council of Governments. These data are from ODOT crash reports. And so I think in the detailed reports, there may be additional information, but just from this point level data, we don't have any information about where people were traveling to from, whether they were just passing through.
Thank you. I had a long career in the fire department here locally, and my experience, having responded to thousands of motor vehicle accidents, where we experience a higher rate of accidents in arterials, especially where there's traffic crossing at a 90-degree angle. It creates more opportunities for two solid objects to occupy the same space at the same point in time, thus a crash. So while I think it's of note to show where they are located in comparison to where people live, I think it's also important that if we're really trying to analyze the problem and trying to find solutions, that we look at the mechanics of transportation along with where they're located. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Groves. Questions from Vidal?
Let's see. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay.
In.
Yeah, I just have a really quick question. I'm just trying to understand graph number. This graph could probably work too. And good job, by the way, presenting this. Really appreciate the level of detail trying to express what we think is kind of happening out there. I'm interested to know what forms the boundaries of each one of the colors? Is it the actual streets? Is it some fence that goes to nowhere? Is it parks? What is making the boundaries show up here?
Thank you. Those are census block groups. So these are census, yeah, census geographies.
Okay. Because the question that kind of came to my mind is, in those areas, obviously, where it's the deeper colors, could they benefit or be able to piggyback off of an adjacent block to be able to help meet some of their transportation needs? Again, this is just a Central Lane MPO right here. Obviously, we're not looking at it in detail, but I was wondering, why was these blocks formed the way that they were? And if it was a street that was kind of identifying it, or some barrier identifying it, maybe that's something we could possibly look into. But since you say it's the census data, maybe that's, thank you.
Awesome, great. Commissioner Farr, you got your hand up, sir.
Thank you, Chair, President, excuse me. I have a much lower level question, and it's and I'm glad that Vidal is here, because I know Vidal's been working on this very specifically. Initially, my question is, can we zoom in? Is there a place that I can find online to zoom in more closely on some of these maps? And I'm looking specifically at the crashes map. That's just a general question. You can get me that information later. But I wanted to mention, if you look at clusters of crashes, I hear pretty regularly about one cluster that Vidal's heard about quite a bit also. Is basically at the corner of Beltline Road and Highway 99, which is where there's a large home improvement center right there, which has a very dangerous intersection. It's a left turn on Highway 99 out of a very busy parking lot. That crashes occur there all of the time. And Vidal, without digging too deep into this right now, I know you've worked on this one very specifically, and the exclusion of the inability to put a traffic light there is something that I wanted to highlight. That crashes occur, and sometimes there's simply nothing we can do about it other than kind of continue to watch them happen. So, Vidal, if you have anything to say about that, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, it's just a point that I'm making, that sometimes crashes continue to occur, and no matter what we do, there are rules that allow us to not do anything further about it.
Very, very good. Can I comment there?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, very good point there that you're making there. There are certain situations that we find ourselves, and we are constrained by policy. We're constrained by various things that kind of outside of our control. But then again, the only solution, or the only way to try to do something, is you pretty much have to reorganize the entire location. But that would be either cost prohibitive of some sort, or to some magnitude much deeper than what we can even afford. And you're right there at that corner of 99 and Fiona Drive, I think is the exact location next to the Jerry's there. It's been prone to have some issues there, and ODOT's looked at there, trying to do some touches up here and there to see if we can improve the area. But again, time will tell as far as the little improvements we are able to do to see if we could lessen the impacts right there. And those types of things, like you mentioned, Commissioner Farr, that yes, it will show up on this graph if we could zoom in and see what the numbers actually are showing us.
Then, if I may, Chair, while we have a bit of an audience, Vidal, I'd like to point out that you have done a lot. You've listened to them very closely. You've met with them continually, and you've done pretty much everything that you can do. I believe that they feel you've been very responsive, and to me, it's an indication of the work that you do personally, Vidal, that you are really listening to the people who you serve. Thank you.
Yeah, and just in addition to that, Paul dropped a link from the LCOG website into the chat as well, that it would help you kind of zoom in on that too, if you want to check that out. Mayor Bennis, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to these maps are really fascinating, and I'm so interested in the earlier map also that shows the crosshatching of the housing burdened and the transportation burdened areas. And I guess I would just really welcome a staff to sort of connect the dots for us on this, on how this information, ultimately, we could use this information as an NPC. And, sort of thinking about the choices that we're making around mean, recognizing that we're not responsible for housing policy, but many of us sitting in our respective city governments are responsible for housing policy, and sort of connecting the dots of where is it in our community that people are both housing burdened and transportation burdened, and how is that factoring into a conversation that we're having at MPC about our sort of regional planning. And I'm not exactly sure where that comes in, and I'd just be interested in any of the staff here sort of talking about how you see this playing out as we actually look to the next iteration of this incredible document.
Thank you for that comment. I think one of the things to note about this is the first time we've done this analysis, and it was exactly in pursuit of what you mentioned, right? We want to try to be connecting these dots and try to, push on the levers we're able to push on to improve the situation in the MPO area. One of the conclusions we drew, like I mentioned, was just that like these would be good areas to target transportation options programming. So that's one way we're kind of interpreting this, is like, picking out some of the census block groups where there are 3 or 4 of these historically excluded populations that exist in a higher percentage than they do in the region-wide average, that those might be areas that could be good places to target. And I don't know if Josh or Kelly have any other thoughts. We're still kind of thinking through this and kind of how we can apply this, but certainly excited about just this representation, I guess, this ability to kind of dig a little bit deeper into those data.
Yeah, good. Vito, you had a response to that, I would assume?
Yeah, I'm going to just quickly say, and maybe this is part of Mayor Vennis's question too. It would be nice to see a year from now, 2 years from now, to see if there's some shifts in these colors, in these lines, to help us identify, okay, where is these issues migrating to help us identify what could be the causes of these issues. If we can see it today and see it 3 months from now, again, I don't know what that magic limitation is as far as time is concerned, but to see where these things are propagating to, or maybe they're kind of disappearing or dissipating from what's going on here. Maybe we are doing something right that will show up over time, that will allow us to see that things are kind of moving away, if that makes sense. Again, that's just my thought, piggybacking off what Mayor Vennis just mentioned there.
Yeah, good. Dan, you had a comment, sir?
Yeah, thanks. And maybe Paul was going to give a more thorough response, but just addressing a little bit how this information is used by the MPO. So we have a couple of plans, like our public participation plan, which identifies these areas and people who we don't traditionally hear from as much as we'd like to, or participate as much in the project decision-making process. So that's one way that this is utilized, trying to focus our outreach efforts on some of these populations, but also our Title VI plan articulates how this information is used, particularly for our project selection, where we're accountable to ensure that these are considerations that are taken into account as we're deciding how projects are being funded and what kinds of projects are being built where. We cannot have an adverse effect project on these populations. So those are some of the ways that this information is used by the MPO.
Awesome, thank you. Paul.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Rachel and Dan both gave excellent examples, and I'll just expand a little bit. Rachel mentioned that as we look at these disadvantaged or burdened areas, we can perhaps focus transportation options activities and outreach. We could, part of that, for instance, the Safe Routes to Schools is a subset of that or related to that. We also have the Safe Lane Coalition work, and that might be more targeted towards the areas where we're seeing those fatal and other crashes, although, as was asked, it's not necessarily because there's people living in those areas. It may be people passing through. To that point, I looked real quick, scanned the data portal, scanned the data that we have. I don't believe we have the ability at this time to identify that parameter that Councilor Groves asked about. In other words, where these people were traveling from or to who were involved in those serious and injury and fatal crashes. And then I'd also just want to Vidal, I appreciate the idea of following up on this. As Rachel said, it's the first time we've really analyzed a lot of this deeply. We do plan to continue to do this, keep track of it. It's not something, unfortunately, where this data is updated every couple of months, though. The crash data, for instance, we have to get from ODOT, and by the time they process it, we're here in the last month of 2024, and the current crash data from ODOT is from 2022. So, and then a lot of the census data obviously is not updated frequently enough to track it as much as we'd like in real time, but we'll certainly continue to keep track of it. All of that said, final comment real quick, as I let Chair Lovell and staff know, I need to leave the meeting early, so thank you all. I'm gonna be leaving right now.
All right, thank you, Paul. Godspeed, sir. Kelly.
I can let Counselor Mo go first and then kind of do a wrap up.
Okay, sounds good. Counselor Mo, you're up, sir.
This is something I've been bringing up for a long time, and I'm going to put it out there right now. My office is 200 feet from Franklin Boulevard. At the intersection of Henderson and Franklin Boulevard, over the years, I have seen 17 fatalities. People dead. I've been on site. I've seen them. I can stand out there and show you where they happened. And I've never been able to get anybody to take it serious. Now, the new roundabouts are going to be going in eventually, and they'll probably take care of it. But up till now, those are human lives, and that's really bothered me that I haven't been able to get anybody to be concerned like I have. Remember those trees down there, claimed 5 of them, and power poles and everything else here. And right now, there was no traffic there because the traffic's dropped off. So it's a freeway at night, and there's more events happening that I probably don't even know about. So I had to get that out there. So thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, and Kelly, if you're going to wrap this up, I'd like to make just a quick intersection in light of all the conversations we've had with Councilor Groves, spurring us on to having our infrastructure and bridges intact for seismic events to get people to the hospital. It was interesting that seismic risk map drew my attention on page 94, that obviously it follows the liquefaction of our rivers, but look how many major thoroughfares cross that region in our area and how wide of a swath that is. So that was kind of like, wow, that could be a real sticky issue in a disaster. So that's what kind of led me to kind of go, wow. So Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, mention one of the other ways that this could be used, all this data, not just around the map we're seeing here, but everything in the existing conditions memo. We really do hope it's a resource for our regional partners. We have the opportunity to look at our region as a whole, not specific to one jurisdiction or the other, so we can see things at a broader perspective. And so do hope that this serves as a resource as we're talking about housing policy or policies outside of just transportation. And we will be, like Rachel mentioned, using this for a variety of things as we move forward with the RTP. It's really our base layer, and then we kind of build upon that as we're looking at what are performance measures, as we're developing the project list, where are we developing projects, and where are those investments being allocated. So this is really kind of a foundational piece of this RTP. So appreciate all the conversation that we're hearing today about this.
Good. So in other words, take this packet and put it in a file where you can refer to it. Don't put it in the recycle, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Rachel, you have any final comments to wrap us up?
I do not. Thank you so much for your time today and for the great discussion.
All right. Again, well done. This was really informative, and obviously real time would be awesome, but this is a great start and it's got lots of depth. So hopefully we'll get some good stuff from it. All right. So let's move on to item 7B. It's the federal amendment matrix for our transportation improvement program. This is basically keeping us up to date on the new standards for change approvals. In the development world, we call these change orders. That way everybody understands what's going on and who pays for it. So this is a conversation that Daniel's going to lead us in. So when you're ready, sir, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My name is Daniel Collister, Senior Planner at Lane Council of Governments. This is an informational item regarding the update to the federal amendment matrix. So I have to warn you, this is probably a little more technical and into the weeds than most of the topics that we bring to this committee, but since it reflects a change to the content of one of the MPO's key work products. That's the Transportation Improvement Program, which MPC adopted last year. I thought it would be appropriate to give just a brief explanation of it and what, if any, impact it'll have on the MPO. So one of the functions of the Metropolitan Planning Organization is to maintain a list of all transportation projects in the MPO that will use federal funding over the current 4-year funding cycle. And that list is called the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. It includes specific details about each project, like funding details down to the penny, obligation timelines, a description of the work, geographic scope, etc. A lot of those details are going to change as projects evolve or as economies change, and that's just the nature of things. But the TIP has to reflect all those changes before a contract can be executed or before work can proceed. So some of those changes can be made administratively. They don't end up holding up the process too much, but there are some kinds of changes that require approval from Federal Highway Administration or Federal Transit Administration. Those are referred to as amendments. And processing amendments can sometimes hold up a project considerably, especially since amendments also require completion of a public comment period. So the regional FHWA and FTA representatives determine, in coordination with Oregon DOT, what types of project changes will trigger an amendment to the TIP. And there is a document that we refer to as the amendment matrix that lists what those specific types of changes are. The matrix was last updated in 2021. It's being updated again now. There are just a couple changes being put in place. The existing matrix states that an amendment is required when adding or deleting a work type in a project. So work types are a mechanism that ODOT uses in their financial plan for coding and other purposes. It's really more an indicator sometimes of how the project is funded rather than what type of work is being done. The updated matrix instead states that an amendment is required when adding or deleting scope from the project that is outside of the current approved intent of the project. Another change to the matrix is that an amendment is currently required for all Federal Transit Administration funded project changes that result in a 30% or more increase or decrease in a project's total funding. In the new matrix, increases or decreases to FTA funded projects are going to follow the same graduated scale that's in place for all other projects, which is for projects under $1 million, an increase or decrease of 50% or more. For $1 to $5 million, 30% or more. And for projects of over $5 million, 20% or more of change. Both of these changes are intended to provide flexibility and hopefully to reduce some delays that are caused by the amendment approval process. There is one other final change to the matrix. Currently, federal approval is not required to create a new project out of an approved program-specific pool of funds that is already accounted for in the TIP, or when adding those funds to a project that is already in the TIP, if that project was selected through a specific process, such as ODOT's All Roads Transportation Safety or ARTS program, or the local bridge program, for example. Those instances will trigger an amendment now. So that was a mouthful. But all that's to say, there have been a few changes. Those are going into effect January 1st. What does it mean for Central Lane MPO? Probably not a whole lot. I think the changes are good myself. There will be a few LTD project changes that will get approved quite a bit more quickly now, which I'm sure LTD will appreciate. The changes are taking place though. I'm just presenting them for the committee's information to let you know that I've updated our adopted TIP document to reflect these changes. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions the committee may have.
Good job. Thanks, Dan, for walking us through the weeds there. Good work. Any questions for Dan on the procedures changes? I might have one just question, maybe just kind of understanding, Dan. When you're talking about a project that's $1 million and it has a 50% flexibility for change, is that something that is extended from the previous one, which gives us a little bit more movement without having the minutia of every decision be under scrutiny?
So there is more flexibility now. So that threshold has always been in place for Federal Highway Administration funded projects, but previously FTA funded projects, any change of 30% or more triggered the full amendment. Now it will take up to 50% for projects under $1 million.
Gotcha. All right, good. That clears it up. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Any other questions for Dan? Any other comments? All right, well, let's move on to our item C of 7. And Dan's also got this one too. This is the annual listing of obligated projects for 2024. Let's see how we stack up. Are we getting all of them done, Dan?
We're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Let's hear it.
So yeah, this is the annual listing of obligated projects. Central Lane MPO publishes this as a report every year within 90 days after the end of each federal fiscal year. This 2024 report was published on the MPO website in November and has been provided to our state and federal partners. So obligation is essentially the federal government's commitment to pay the federal share of a project's cost as it's stipulated by whatever IGA or contract is in place for that project. The data for this report is provided initially to the MPO by ODOT as an export from the Federal Highways Fiscal Management System. It shows all FHWA fund transactions that took place through the prior fiscal year. Those numbers are then reviewed and quality checked by staff. I share those numbers then with the local agency partners, those who are delivering the project, just to make sure the numbers look good, making any corrections where it's needed. For the FTA funded project obligations, I work with Lane Transit District to create a similar list of the projects that had executed grant agreements with FTA in the prior fiscal year. Those lists are then compiled to create this obligation report. So the report provides a pretty high level pulse on how things are going in the Eugene-Springfield area, where work is moving forward. It also reports to the public how federal transportation dollars are actually being spent in the area. So in a nutshell, this in FY 2024, there were a total of $38.9 million of federal funds obligated to 34 different transportation improvement projects in the MPO. Lane Transit District projects made up 42% of those obligations. They were pretty busy. The MPO discretionary surface transportation block grant funding was by far the most obligated funding program, with over $16 million obligated to projects last year. And that is really good news, especially keeping in mind that we rely on the obligation of those funds particularly so we can continue to receive the federal redistribution each year. You might recall that I brought that to MPC last month when we added over $1 million of redistribution to 2 projects, one from City of Eugene, one from Lane County. The report includes each individual obligation starting on page 4 as a list that's sorted by project and sponsor agency. Again, this is a report that's been published. It's for your information. There's no action here, but I am happy to answer questions if there are any.
Super. Great job again, Dan. Any questions for Dan? Anybody got their favorite project on the board that's almost ready for completion they want to do a woohoo on before we move forward? All right. I guess not. Sounds good. Dan, awesome job. Thank you again, sir. Hey, before we move on, I just wanted to bring up something too, that I got a letter from the governor. It was addressed to me because I was the chair, but I really had no work on this. But it was the ODOT folks who made our Metropolitan Planning Area boundary map work done, and she's approving that. And I believe that the kudos would go to Paul and Nathaniel and Ned and Chris and Travis and Amanda, Eric and Naomi, who did all this great work. So I want to let you know I received this. And so all those involved, great work. Our boundaries are approved, and we are the banner organization of the state. So we need to keep our first place ribbon intact. So thank you for all your hard work for doing that. Super. All right. Any other information that we have. Vidal, do you have a quick update on your ODOT plan? Do you want to make anything there, sir?
I can say I think everyone's probably aware of right now that the governor has put out her proposed budget for 25-27 biennium, and it recommends to the Oregon legislature that an additional 1.75 billion in funding to ODOT for the upcoming biennium. And again, if it's approved by the legislature, this funding would help prevent some of those deep cuts that we were discussing earlier in the year, if you will, so that we can provide the services that's required and demanded, to be honest with you, for Oregonians. I don't want to go into all of the details. I don't know if you've read through it a whole lot. I can give a couple of highlights, but it's looking fairly good for us, at least from what the governor's proposing, and that would be awesome. Again, it has to go through the legislature, so that the work is not finished yet, and so we're still hoping for the best as things kind of move forward. But it's a testament to show that the governor is really making a hard step forward for the agency.
Yeah, especially with $1.75 billion. That's something you don't slip under the closet door, right?
No, you don't.
Yeah. Councilor Groves, what do you got?
Thank you, Chair. Vidal, thank you for that information. I think that's good news. Will that just cover operational costs, or will some of that be capital?
No, to my understanding, at least for the most part, the 1.75 million is not exactly what ODOT originally asked for. I think it's slightly less, a little bit less, but most of the work, at least from what I'm seeing right now, I've got my talking points here. If you want me to, I can read it to you, but most of the work here is really to cover ODOT in their services, ODOT and their functions that they're doing for some of the citizens. Like, for example, 100 million for DMV, obviously targeted to have less waiting for customers getting service. And there was another 433 million to modernize our systems, our workforce, and our ODOT facilities that are, statewide, talking like buildings and so forth that we have. There was 410 million for better roads, sidewalks, and bike lanes. Again, that's specifically for maintenance work itself, the graffiti, housing, camp cleanups, and so forth. And again, there was another 80 million, at least I'm seeing here, for safer roads for all Oregonians. And again, that investment was to make safety improvements across the system. It didn't quite identify what are those safety improvements across the system. But again, that goes more towards, building better safe crossings and try to reduce speed limits where it's necessary, where it's needed in certain areas. And again, I think majority, if not all, majority of it really is going towards ODOT being more efficient, better, if you will, in terms of what services we provide for the state, statewide.
That's great. But if you could keep us apprised of processes for identifying and highlighting some of our safety concerns here in our region, so that we can make sure that we have our paperwork done and any applications in, if that's the process, or help us understand at the MPC what the process entails, that would be really beneficial and much appreciated. As you know, I have some real personal and professional concern about our seismic stability of our bridges on our major transportation routes. Thank you.
Oh, point well taken, and appreciate the concern there.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilor Groves. Anyone else? All right. No other comments. Let's move on to the TIP project changes. Is there any changes with that? Typically, Paul takes that. Is that something, Kelly, you want to take, or is there any changes that we need to be aware of, or Dan?
Yeah, these are just information only. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any, but these were changes that were approved by the Transportation Planning Committee.
Going once, twice. All right, good. No questions. Well, super. That brings us to the end of our illustrious time together. I appreciate all of your time and your effort. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 6th of February, and then one after that would be March 6th. And Commissioner Farr, you have your hand up, sir, before I exit.
Just a very brief, I don't know if you all heard, there's a pretty large earthquake off the coast of California earlier this morning. I'm probably not the only one with family in San Francisco, but I just got reports back that everything's fine in San Francisco. Tsunami warning's been reduced. You probably heard that already. But a personal, nothing even fell off the shelf in San Francisco. So.
Wow, great. Thank you for that update. That's awesome. All right, well, let me leave you with this final thought of our final meeting of the year 2024. A new year is a blank canvas. Paint it in with your light and passion of your dreams, not the clouded dark colors of worry and fear. And that one's from me. So there you go. You have a great Christmas, everyone, and a great holiday, and appreciate your work here on the committee. We'll see you next year.